Sticky buns. What a way to wake up in the morning. They make the house smell great and they're delicious. Sort of like a cinnamon roll, except for these aren't frosted. We're actually gonna make a butter, brown sugar, and nut mixture that we put on the bottom of our cake pans, that when we turn them out after they're cooked, they will kind of drip down and make this wonderful sticky bun. So we're gonna start with our yeast. This is 2 1/4 teaspoons or 1 packet of active dry yeast. We're going to put that into some warm water. We're looking for anywhere between 95 and at most about 120 degrees. Any more than that and you could kill your yeast. Any less than that and your yeast won't do anything. We always like to do this step to make sure that before we add it to all of these wonderful ingredients that our yeast aren't already dead or may have been in your pantry since the 70s. We like to make sure that they are nice and awake. So we proof them in some warm water. I like to give it a little bit of sugar just to give it something to eat in the morning as it wakes up. And then we're gonna let it sit for a little while we talk about our liquids. So in here, I have some whole milk, some butter, some sugar, and a pinch of salt. And I scalded it, meaning bringing it just up below the boiling point. And then I have let it cool. We definitely don't want this to be super hot when we add our yeast mixture to it, because again, it could kill it. So I'm gonna put this into the bowl of my stand mixer, fitted with a paddle attachment. We like to use the paddle attachment in this case because it gets all the way down to the bottom of our bowl. And then we're gonna add about a cup of our flour. It's 3 cups total for this recipe, but we're only gonna add about a cup of it at this point, just to kind of get it started. It's gonna do a couple things. It's going to kind of cool down that mixture of our milk, butter, and sugar to make sure that our yeast doesn't die and our eggs don't scramble later. And it's going to give the dough someplace to go. So now, once that's nice and incorporated, my yeast is doing just fine. I can see there's bubbles rising to the top. It's gonna form kind of the head of a beer on here, starting to eat and give off CO2, which is great. But I'm gonna go ahead and add my egg into the dough. Make sure that gets nice and incorporated. Then I'm going to add my yeast. It smells great. The other thing the flour is doing, other than bringing down the temperature of the milk, is it's actually helping our yeast to be buffered from the salt. Yeast and salt do not get along, so we insulate it with a little bit of flour so that the two can be combined. So once that's all combined, I'm going to add the rest of my flour. It's going to make a very sticky dough. That's okay. We're going to let that knead for a couple minutes while all of the ingredients get incorporated and the flour gets hydrated. And then we'll actually turn it out and put it into a greased bowl, cover it with some plastic wrap, and then we're going to let it proof for about an hour, maybe 90 minutes. So my dough is now kneaded and pulling away from the sides of my mixing bowl, which is exactly what you're looking for. So now I'm going to take it out of my stand mixer, get it off the beater. It's still a little sticky. And then I'm just going to use this wonderful tool. It's called a bowl scraper. It's got a nice rounded edge at the top so that I can scrape out every last bit of dough and plop it on my work surface. I'm going to quickly knead it just to kind of bring it together. And then I'm going to put it into a well-oiled bowl, kind of smear it around, and then turn it upside down like that so the oiled side is up. That's going to help it A, not stick, and B, it's going to allow it to rise easily. I'm going to cover it with some plastic wrap. We're going to put this into a nice warm place. We're using a proofing oven, but you can use it, you can put it somewhere near the vent of your oven, anywhere that's nice and warm. We're going to wait until it doubles in size. That can take anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes. Don't necessarily go by time because it all depends on the heat of where you've put it. So we want to just look for, make sure it's doubled in size, and then we're ready to roll it out and fill it. While our dough is rising, we're going to go ahead and get our sticky mixture ready. It is our stick of room temperature butter and our brown sugar. Now we're doing one of these for each of my 2 cake pans. So I just find it's easier to mix them in separately so that I get the exact same amount in each one. So we're going to mash together our butter and our brown sugar, make sure it's really nice and well combined. It's a lot easier to do it in this bowl than it is to try and spread the butter out in the pan and then sprinkle over the brown sugar. And I always like to give a nice little pinch of salt. It's going to cut through all of that sweetness. And then, when we're ready, we're going to spread this in the bottom of our cake pans, sprinkle it with some nuts, and then we are going to put our little rolls in the cake pans. For the filling of our sticky buns, we're going to combine our pecans, nice and finely chopped. You can leave those out if you want. Some granulated sugar, and some cinnamon. It's going to make the house smell wonderful. We're just going to gently mix this with our hands, make sure all the sugar and the cinnamon is evenly distributed through all of those nuts. So we're going to sprinkle some of this on the bottom of our cake pans, and then we're going to sprinkle over our dough as it's rolled out before we roll it up. So it's been about 90 minutes, and our dough is risen. It has doubled in size. It looks and smells wonderful. And now we're going to get ready to roll it out. First, we're going to punch it down, and we love when we see people go push their fist right into it. It's not actually what we want to do. We kind of want to just bring our fingers around the edges, kind of pull it in. We're expelling some of that CO2, and we're kind of equalizing the temperature. And then we're going to put a little bench flour down. And then we're going to dump it out. And remember, this recipe makes 2 pans of sticky buns. So we want to kind of do our best to cut it in half as equally as you can. We'll save one for a little bit. So this one we're going to kind of spread out, make sure it gets nice and well coated with flour, and then we're going to roll it into a nice big rectangle. So my dough is rolled out into an approximate rectangle. Just remember, it's breakfast, not geometry. And then we are going to brush our dough with a little bit of a beaten egg. This is going to help our cinnamon and sugar and pecans stick to our dough when we roll it up. You don't need a lot, just trying to help it stick. And then we're going to sprinkle some of our sugar and nut mixture right over top of our dough. And I like to just take my rolling pin and gently roll over the dough. That's going to help press those nuts and the sugar and the cinnamon kind of into the dough, just gently. And then we're going to roll it up. So I like to start on the end closest to me, rolling away. And we're just going a little bit at a time, rolling it into a nice, tight log. It's another time to get the kids involved. And then as you're rolling, sometimes if I see a little extra bench flour on there, I can always take a brush and brush that off. But we're just going to keep rolling until we get all the way to the end. And then we're going to cut it into our rolls. Best way to cut it is with a piece of dental floss, but if you want, you can just use a knife. looks fantastic. Just kind of give it a little squeeze, right like that. And when we're cutting things like this trying to cut it into a uniform shape or size, we like to start in the middle, cut it in half first. Then we're gonna cut each half in half, and then into quarters, and then into eighths. It's much easier than trying to measure out eighths each and every time as you go down your log of dough. So I've placed my cut sticky buns into my pan that had the butter and brown sugar and the chopped pecans in the bottom, and I've spaced them out just a little bit because we're gonna let them rise again. So they will swell a little bit, so we want to give them a little bit of room. So again, we're going to cover it in a little bit of plastic, and we're going to put it back into a nice warm place for about 30 minutes to an hour.